Okay, so you brought Aevo to our attention, and we've done a bit of digging. We wanted to really unpack what this thing is, this
Mhm.
Aevo Decentralized Exchange,
Mhm.
and figure out why it might be relevant for you.
Right. And it's interesting because at its heart, Aevo is a decentralized exchange, a DEX, but it's got a very specific focus.
Each is.
Derivatives,
Mhm.
specifically options and perpetual contracts. Perps are like those futures contracts without an expiry date, and options give you the right, not the obligation, to buy or sell later.
Gotcha. Standard derivatives, but what's the hook here?
Well, the interesting part is where it operates. It's not just another protocol on, say, Ethereum mainnet. It runs on its own dedicated layer 2 blockchain.
Oh, an L2. Okay.
Yeah, called Aevo L2, and it's built on the OP stack.
Ah, optimism's tech. So aiming for faster, cheaper transactions while still being tied to Ethereum security. Yeah.
Exactly. That seems to be the goal. Speed, lower fees, but leveraging Ethereum underneath. Their bigger picture, their sort of mission, is pretty ambitious too. They're talking about building a DeFi super app.
A super app. Starting with derivatives, though.
Starting with derivatives, yes. They've already got perpetuals trading going. It's like over 60 markets. Plus something called pre-launch trading.
Pre-launch. Trading tokens before they even list.
Yeah, exactly. Lets you speculate on things, really. Creates buzz. And, of course, they have options trading, which was kind of their starting point.
Okay. Specialized but aiming big. Let's circle back to that L2 for a second. You mentioned OP Stack. The sources also talked about Conduit and Celestia. How do they fit in?
Good question. So think of Conduit as handling the operational side, like the day-to-day running of the Aevo L2 infrastructure. They're specialists in that.
Okay, the plumbers, basically.
Sort of, yeah, keeping the pipes working smoothly. And then Celestia, that's really about data availability. Instead of storing all the transaction data directly on Ethereum or even the main OKey chain, they use Celestia. It's like a specialized layer just for making sure the transaction data is available and verifiable, but in a much more efficient, cheaper way.
So that's how they lower costs for users.
Yeah.
By offloading the data part.
That's a key part of it, yeah. Reduces the burden on the L2 itself, which should translate to lower gas fees for you when you trade.
Makes sense. Cheaper trading is always a plus.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift to the token. AEVO. It's not just for trading, right? It has other roles.
Correct. The AEVO token primarily does two things based on what we read. First, governance. Holding AEVO gives you a vote. You can weigh in on network upgrades, new listings on the exchange, general DAO decisions, the usual governance stuff.
Standard DO participation. And the second thing.
Staking. If you stake your AEVO, you get benefits on the platform. Things like discounted trading fees, which is pretty direct, and also apparently boosted rewards in their trader reward program. So it incentivizes holding and using the platform.
Right. Tying the token's value to platform usage and governance. What about the supply? How many AEVO are there?
Total supply is capped at 1 billion tokens. That's the max. When it launched properly around mid-March 2024, the initial circulating supply was 110 million, so about 11% of the total.
And a chunk of that went through Binance Launch Pool.
Yeah, 45 million AEVO, which is 4.5% of the total, was allocated there, a pretty common strategy to get wider distribution and visibility right at launch.
And it's an ERC20 token.
Mm-hmm.
So lives on Ethereum fundamentally, even though the exchange is on this L2.
Yes, ERC20 standard. So compatible with the usual Ethereum wallets and infrastructure.
Now, there was also mention of Ribbon Finance. RDN token. How does that connect? It's the same team, right?
Exactly. The team behind Aevo originally launched Ribbon Finance, another DeFi project focused on structured products like options vaults. To kind of merge the communities or bootstrap Evo, they allowed RBN holders to convert their RBN into AEVO.
At what rate?
1-to-1, so 1 RBN for 1 AEVO. But there was a 2-month lockup on the AEVO received from the conversion.
Oh, okay. So you couldn't just convert and dump immediately.
Right. And meanwhile, any original vesting schedule for the RBN token still applied. It seems like a way to bring Ribbon's user base and liquidity over to the new Aevo platform.
Makes strategic sense.
Mm-hmm.
What about token unlocks? Are more AEVO tokens hitting the market soon?
Well, the info suggests that the tokens for early investors, the seed and Series A folks, and the team's converted RBN were scheduled to be fully vested by May 2024.
So likely already unlocked or unlocking around now.
Pretty much. So that supply is entering circulation. One important point, though. AEVO itself doesn't seem to have ongoing emissions baked into the protocol right now.
Yeah, inflation.
Not directly from the token contract, it seems. But the DAO has set aside a big chunk, 16% of the total supply. That's earmarked for future user incentives, ecosystem growth, that kind of thing. and they plan to distribute that over about 4 years.
Okay, so planned, controlled inflation via incentives, not just continuous printing. That 16% over 4 years suggests they're thinking longer term.
Yeah, it signals a commitment to keep growing the platform and attracting users.
And they did raise significant capital too, right? Something like $16.6 million.
That's right. 16.6 member across 3 rounds, seed, Series A, and Series A plus N.
And valuations went up quite a bit with each round.
They did. Started at around $18.05 valuation, then $130, then $250 for the A plus round. Definitely shows growing investor confidence along the way.
Okay, let's look forward then.
Yeah.
What's the plan? What does their roadmap say? Any cool stuff coming up?
Well, looking back first, they moved fast. Q2 2023, they launched with ETH options. Q3, they added perps. Then Q4 2023 seemed like a breakout quarter. They launched those pre-launch futures we mentioned, their own stablecoin, a SHI-USD.
A stable coin, interesting. Probably used for trading pairs on the platform.
Most likely, yeah. Helps keep things internal. And they hit some big volume milestones, $100 million daily, then even $1 billion daily volume.
Wow, okay. For a specialized DX, that's pretty significant early traction. What drove that, do you think? Just the appeal of derivatives on DeFi or the L2 benefits?
Probably a mix of both. Lower fees certainly help attract volume, and there's definite demand for these kinds of trading tools in the DeFi space.
So what about this year? What's on deck for 2024?
Okay, so Q1 was largely about the Aevo token launch and airdrop. Q2, which we're kind of in the middle of or just past, was planned for launching trading incentives for users on the exchange itself. Also launching something called Aevo Strategies.
Aevo strategies. Sounds like maybe automated vaults or something.
Could be, maybe prepackaged strategies users can deploy. They also plan a request for, quote, an RFQ platform.
RFQ, like for bigger trades, getting custom quotes.
Yeah, typically used for larger orders or options trades where you want specific pricing from market makers rather than just hitting the public order book for spot and derivative.
Okay, and then Q3.
Q3 looks interesting. They're planning for permissionless deployments on Aevo L2. Meaning other developers could potentially build their own apps on top of Aevo's layer 2, not just using the Aevo Exchange, but building new things on that infrastructure.
Opening it up. So Evo L2 could become its own little ecosystem, not just for the Aevo Exchange itself.
That seems to be the ambition, yes, along with general ecosystem building efforts in that quarter.
That could be really significant if other projects start building there. This source has also mentioned some partnerships.
Right. Q1 seemed to be Socket for cross-chain stuff, making it easier to get assets onto Aevo L2 from other chains. Conduit, who we mentioned, for running the L2 infrastructure, and Celestia for the data availability layer, keeping costs down.
Seems like a solid set of partners covering key technical areas.
Yeah, it looks like a thought-out approach to the technical stack.
And if people want to follow along, get involved. Where's the community?
Usual places, really. They're on Twitter. They even have a specific Chinese language account, Medium for longer posts and updates, and Discord for community chat and support.
Standard crypto community hubs.
Got it. Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. The gist is, Aevo is a decentralized derivatives exchange focused on options and perpetuals. It runs on its own custom layer 2, built with the OP stack, and using Celestia to keep fees low.
Right. It has its own token, AEVO, for governance and staking benefits, which evolved partly from the Ribbon finance ecosystem. And they've got a roadmap focused on adding features, incentives, and potentially opening up their L2 for other developers to build on, aiming to be more than just an exchange.
Exactly. They're carving out a niche by specializing in derivatives and building their own infrastructure for it. Which leads to a really interesting question for you, the listener, to think about. How might this kind of specialized approach, building a dedicated L2 just for derivatives, stack up against competitors, both other DXs and the big centralized exchanges?
Yeah, what are the real advantages or maybe disadvantages of going deep on one thing like this, building your own custom highway, versus just using the main roads? Is that focus a strength or a potential limitation for users like you intrigued in these markets?
Something to chew on.
Definitely. Well, hopefully this deep dive gave you a clearer picture of what Aevo is all about. Thanks for exploring it with us. We encourage you to keep watching the DeFi space. It's always changing, and platforms like Aevo are definitely part of that evolution.